Now I'd like to introduce our first keynote speaker, who is Kumi Kuroda of RIKEN Center for Brain Science. We are so pleased to have Kumi share her thoughts on how media can bridge science and society. Kumi, please.
Hello, everybody. I'm Kumi from RIKEN, and I'm so glad and honored to be here to share some of my experience about the science communication and to discuss with you, because we definitely need science media, science communication, because I'm studying parent-infant relationship in neuroscience. And it's a very high implication to real society, especially we deal with child abuse, 児童虐待. It's a lot of sensational news every day, and sometimes it's going to a little bit extreme, so that could create confusion and misunderstanding, and sometimes even harm. So today I'd like to explain some of my experience. First of all, just a kind of introductory. I was working in a psychiatry department, Seishinka, of Osaka University Hospital, Handai Seishinka. And I was shocked by so many people, coming with their problems, mental health issues, including alcohol abuse or like trichotillomania. I put that because one of my first, a similar issue is also in the eating disorders. Many people came as bulimia, anorexia, and once they start talking about their early life, for example, my father died suddenly when she was a junior high school or something like that. It's really vivid. So I thought that these early history, especially when they're a child, the relationship with the parents really have a big influence on the future mental health. That's why I came into the neuroscience of parent-infant relationship. And indeed, this the relationship with the parents is the first social relationship that baby make. And that is basically a lifeline of the baby, because these infants cannot survive without parental care. All mammalian species, including us humans, but also other mammalian animals, totally rely on parental care. If they are left alone for 3 days, they basically die. They cannot sustain their life by themselves, which means that this social relationship is the lifeline, and it is most important thing, even more than the food itself. Yes? I think you can agree. So that's why, for example, you're ignored by somebody suddenly in the office or in the classroom. It doesn't directly affect your life, but you feel like really big fear or anxiety. If everybody else ignore me, I don't feel good. It's a big fear. You can imagine that kind of fear comes from these infant age, because at that age, ignorance from the parents is really directly goes to death, right? So we are carrying on that kind of emotion to be tied with other people. So we can study the mechanism of our craving of the social relationship, or particularly the intimate relationship, using animal model, because we share the basic part. Yeah. Just to go and giving you a flavor of how we study the brain mechanism of parental care, for example. We prepare 2 groups of mice. One group was parenting for 2 hours. Another group just staying alone in a cage. And then we take the brain and looking at these black dots. like this. It's strange, huh? I would prefer this, the classic one. I'm not the high-tech person. Well, not this. Okay, so now you see a lot of black dots in this part of the brain, MPOA. Don't ask me what is MPOA. You can never remember, but it's not important. But each black dot corresponds to the activated neurons, because we stain the brain section with the CFOS, the transcription factor, so that we can identify the brain area activated by parental care using this method. It's not the only single areas. There are several areas, for example, here, sometimes here, and also here, are activated by parental care, because behavior are a complex system, including sensory and motor system, of course. But if you take this another group of mice, and then you inhibit the function of particular brain area, in this case MPOA, and going back to let the animal do, after the surgery, let the animal do parental care. And if the animal cannot do this anymore, you can say that, okay, this is not only activated by parental care, but also necessary for parental care. In this way, we can identify the hub of parental care in the brain. This was MPOA. That kind of work we are doing, saying is easy, but it's a very, a lot of burden, a lot of work, and takes a long time. And I'm working for 15 years. And nowadays, we have even more cool technologies. Maybe you've heard about the optogenetics. This is technology that you can manipulate the function of the neurons of the particular brain area. Created by Ed Boyden and Carl Diesvels. They inject certain virus into the small brain area, and this conveys a molecule that respond to light. And then they implant optic fiber into the deep brain, and then shine light. Then you can activate or inhibit the particular brain area. In this way, if we apply this technology to the MPOA, we can even facilitate the parental care in young male mice who are generally not very parental. But if we shine light in there, we can stimulate the parental motivation. Sounds good? But in some sense, it is ethically a little, dangerous or worrying, because we can manipulate the rodent brain. Now we can apply these technology to the non-human primates, which means that we can do that in humans, because these brain areas are not that much different in these species. Yep, it's just a matter of law and ethics. Technically and theoretically, we can manipulate social behavior in humans. Yes? And, somehow strange. And indeed, we are already manipulating the brain in humans. This is a technology called deep brain stimulation. You have an electrode here in the deep brain, in this case, subthalamic nucleus, deep in here, and there's a lead cable here and a battery embedded under the chest skin. Yeah, this technology has been widely used already to cure. For example, this girl has a dystonia, which has a very abnormal muscular tension, so she bent over this way. But after this treatment, she can do like this. It's amazing. Also, it is widely used for Parkinson's disease these days. So manipulating the brain for the purpose to the motor control, the muscular control, is only widely used. And then also sometimes, the BMI, brain-machine interface. Sometimes people use to recover the kind of a body sensation lost by injury by reading out the brain activity and giving back to the, for example, other part of the body. So these way we are decoding the brain function in humans, and we are manipulating the brain function already. It's just a matter of which brain area you are reaching to. If you reach to the subthalamic nucleus, like here, we can control motor control. But if you reach the MPOA, as I showed you before, maybe we can manipulate the parental behavior. This is, I'm not, sorry. So this is, sounds very unethical, not ethical, to manipulate our parental behavior by electrode or optic fiber. But people say, because I'm studying the parental care and child abuse, some people say that, why don't you apply this technology to the abusive parents? Some abusive parents, they do want to perform better parental care, but they can't. Why don't you just use this treatment? Similarly, for example, recurrent sexual crimes. These people have very enormous urge of sexual drive and cannot control them, even though they try to. And in some countries, even we can do castration or the kyosei, or hormonal treatment, the physical treatment. That may not be always successful. Maybe we can directly manipulate the brain area, controlling the sexual behavior. We already know it, where it is. It's very close to the MPOA, and it's 100% work. So it's these wrong behavior, the choice of the social behavior may lead to crimes, including child abuse, including the child sexual abuse even. And why not? So it's a big debate. So these biotech innovations cause hard problems in our real society. We already experience it by assisted reproductive technologies. Of course, since 1970s, after the in vitro fertilization, the first human baby born, and it was really a great cure for the people who are suffering for infertility, 不妊治療. But at the same time, it causes a lot of ethical problems. For example, business of a surrogate mother, like in India, or the human rights. For example, the boy born using a sperm bank wanted to know his father after he was born, and how we can deal with this. Maybe our neuroscience is posing a next hard problem to the assisted reproductive technologies or iPS cells technologies, and so on. I'm not going to go too deep into that for today. So if you have any question, maybe please ask me later on about the brain manipulation. I stopped that topic too. But I think now you're really convinced that we need Scicom, science communication, because these are, not only for the scientists, but really need the general public's opinion, and science communication needs to facilitate it. And in this case, science communication needs to be a good one. Otherwise, it causes even more confusion or misinterpretation, sometimes even a disaster, I think. The latter half, I'd like to talk a little bit about the technical issue about the science communication, which I was encountered in these recent years. Already a lot of people studying this, how to do good science communication. For example, recent bestseller book, Hans Rosling's Factfulness. Another is a TED Talk by Lara Traken. This is a very good short movie clip, so if I think, have you seen that? No? Oh, 0. Amazing. Have you read that book? Ah, phew. Okay. Now, okay. I thought that it's already, everybody knows it, but it's nice. I can tell you new things. Okay, good. So, for example, she is raising an example of Ebola hemorrhagic fever. Ebola 出血熱. Sometimes the news report is too sensationalizing, that evoking a fear rather than objective numbers, but it's a more, emotionally evoking, just provocative. And that kind of news, of course, you have more click view click. It's more, popular you can be. You can sell more news. But that she arguing that this kind of sensationalization is good for business, maybe news business, but it's not good for the public because that actually hinder to find out the real problem and try to solve that. Yes? So please look at this. Very nice. So I just following these people, I raised my own experience, 2 experiences. One is that a very simple one. Our Japanese Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare and annually report the number of deaths in a child care center in Japan. They say okay, we had a total 177 reports in this year, including 160 cases of injuries. Highest number was 5-year-old classes in 54, and 17 deaths, and especially 8 babies dead in a 0-year-old classes. So what? This type of news drives me mad, actually. Because even sometimes the news, radio news, start reading these numbers in the table, just printed in this ministry's report. 0 years, 8 people die in 0-year class, 5 people die in a 1-year-old class this year. So what? It sounds like that childcare is a very dangerous place. Yeah? It would give a wrong interpretation. It may give. So you need to know, you need to tell also, alongside with these numbers, how about infant death at home? If we compare the number of deaths per frequency, per child in these settings, then only we can get idea that if child care center are dangerous or not. And another is that 0 years old looks like more, and 5 is 5, and much less in here. So that 0 years old looks like more vulnerable, or just numerous in care. We never know, unless we know we are given the comparable number, which is age distribution of child care. This is in another report of this ministry, so we need to dig out. Then we can find out, okay, 0 years old population in all daycare child care is only 5.4%. And 3 to 6 years old is more than half. So we can calculate the rough number that maybe 23 times higher frequency of infant death in 0 years old class comparing to the older. Of course, there is a lot of uncertainty that maybe they stay longer in the child care or not, or things like that. But at least we can have an idea, rough idea. So the point here is that no number without concept. Hans Rosling presented this is a lonely, we should avoid lonely number. So we always need to put the numbers in the context to compare with the last year's number or the divided by the general population, things like that. Otherwise, it's caused a misinterpretation. This is, I think, very basic, but still pervasive, I'm sorry to say, but in Japanese news media. Even in the ministry's report. So we cannot blame the science media, but at least we can mend these problems, try to mend this problem. I think everybody agrees with that. The second point is a little bit more complicated. So we are now studying the child abuse cases in Japan, and most serious child abuse, like a death, causing the death of infants, or almost close to death, the unconscious for a long period of time, they're in the prison. So we send a questionnaire to these people in prison. What was the background factors of your case, of your difficult relation with the child? And we send the same questionnaire to the general parents in society. And it turned out that 72% of parents in prison, because of child abuse, had experienced that they are abused by themselves when they're a child. Yes? Comparing to 18% of normal or typical parents. It's much higher, yeah? Clearly, it's a statistically significant difference. It sounds like the transmission of child abuse, 虐待の連鎖. It's famous for intergenerational transmission of child abuse, is reported since 1980s. This is half true, because if we just claim this only, and without other numbers in the context, we may create anxious people who are abused when they're a child. They are not yet having a baby, but they start worrying if I can be a good mother. I feel like I'm worrying. I feel like devastating. Maybe I cannot have a baby, because the statistics says that child abuse transmits to the next generation. How do you think? It's not a trivial thing. Okay, so I tell you three facts that we already have evidence. Yes, being abused increases the risk of child abuse a little bit, 2 to 4 times. Not enormously, not 100%. But it indeed increased the child abuse in the next generation. Second, majority of child abusers are themselves abused in early life. That's what we found this time, but also proved by the other countries' report. The third, majority of abused children do not abuse their children. Does that make sense? The three things looks like paradox, but it's not. I tell you one by one. Using this diagram, this is a generation 1. We don't, basically, in most cases, we don't know if they are abused or not. Abused are red. Abused children are red. Yes, this G1 parents abuse some portion of the second generation and not abused the rest. Yes, those are the majority. And now these abused, definitely with evidence abused children have their own children. Some are abused, some are not 100%. And these non-abused parents have, sometimes they abuse, and in most cases not. Yes? And if you compare the ratio of red part in the third generation, being abused increase the risk of child abuse 2 to 4 times. Yeah? You can see you can have more red comparing to this. Make sense? Now, majority of child abusers were abused in early life. We have more red in here comparing to this, if we compare. These are the children, abused children, but assume that the same number of parents in these. So we can actually compare the abusing parents, number of ratio of abused children. A majority come from this small portion rather than this portion, okay? The third one, majority of abused children do not abuse their children. See? More than less than half. Of course, the ratio is higher than here, but still, majority do not abuse. We always need to be careful about this logic when we convey some kind of message. Otherwise, that causes harm. Another way of saying, group feature is not equal to individual feature. This is very confusing, even to the scientists. Sometimes we confuse, because it sounds like that. If you're abused children, we have a higher risk. It feels like it's a determined fate to abuse the next generation, but actually, it's really not. If you look at this, so this is a complex, but when you convey the message, please understand this, especially for the child abuse. Otherwise, it's harmful. Yeah? And if you think conveying all these kind of things into the general public is too much because my, numbers, spaces are limited, you can just add small phrase like early adversity does not directly make parents abusive. It's not that simple, yeah? So that, this is small and simple thing to claim that. But being abusive parents is not a simple thing. It's not just determined by their history. Their spouse, for example. Abused children have a higher risk to marry with an abusive partner, for example. So it's not that simple. So please embrace this complexity when you try to, make the report. And please do your best to include this small phrase. I insisted that in this case, it was a pretty good coverage of this on this day, the March 31. Was the journalist of Kyodo Tsushin sent out the Japanese newspaper companies, and it was I think more than 20 newspapers put that in. This is about from the Nikkei Shimbun. It's I think a pretty short one, but still they include this. Then maybe we can avoid the possible harm to the abused people who are minority, but they really become sensitive about this kind of news. Yeah, does that make sense? So Hans Rosling, actually, he was dealing with these topics, but he was actually rather pessimistic about the role of science media. Maybe he said something like that, the science media is not the place you want to go to find the truth or something. But I don't agree with that. I do agree, I do believe that science media can do a lot of things, at least in Japan, to facilitate the healthy communication between scientists and general audience by conveying, by just digging deeper a little bit, put the number in the context, and at the same time you need an easy and understandable news clip, but at the same time concern about the possible harm or the danger of the news. So I'm very happy to discuss with you about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kumi. We have about 10 minutes for questions. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and we will deliver the microphone to you.
Thanks for the nice talk. You have to hold it. It's not a question. I just wanted to commiserate. I know there's something that always bothers me, which is similar to the one about the childcare facilities, is that whenever there's a typhoon, they always say 3 people fell and had to be taken to the hospital because of the typhoon. And I always wonder, on a normal day, how many people fall and have to be taken to the hospital because they just fell on a stairway or something like that.
Right.
And so I wonder if how they subtract those statistics out, So I'm always wondering. So it's sort of a similar situation.
Right, I agree. So there's this problem is quite pervasive, even though we know that, this, it really creates the typhoon is dangerous or harmful, right? But it may not be. Yeah, that's, the rather Setrakian claimed about the Ebola outbreak, for example, in Africa. So people avoid even to the Kenya, which is very far away from the Congo, this case, or things like that. Or maybe same as in the Fukushima. I don't know exactly, but so I think the science media should take good care of these issues. That's what I can say, and maybe it depends on each situation or each topic.
And thank you for your talk. As a science communicator, I find it very important to be able to tell an accurate story to journalists and to the general audience. And the greatest thing that I respect about scientists is that you're putting your career on the line. If, say, you were misquoted somewhere, then that could possibly jeopardize your entire career. And for that reason, a number of researchers I try to work with in preparing them to talk to the media, they decline because they think the risk is too big, because it could ruin their reputation. And so for you as a scientist, do you have any advice that you could pass on to other scientists about how important it is to get to make the effort to get the right message out to the science media?
Yeah, that's an important aspect, rather onto the scientist side. And yeah, I was personally, myself, was hesitant to receive an interview, for example, initially. Especially when I was studying the parental care only in the animal model. For example, we found MPOA. If we damage MPOA or inhibit the function, the mom, even the mouse mothers, start biting the pup. And once I told that, I was very, shocking finding, and I told that at home, and when I came back to home, and told that to my son, eldest son, who was 6 years old at the time, and he burst into tears. What did you do to the mouse mother? You're a mad scientist, That kind of response that we are kind of worrying in one sense. And also that, in this case of child abuse, that, parent-infant relationship is so close to general audience. So now I feel like I cannot avoid to receiving. But it's a time, we take, I think we need a systematic effort. For example, these, the Kyoto Tsushin, that person, I know for many years. Because some people really following the child abuse news, the journalists. Two in NHK. I have friends, basically. It's a business, but we made it friend because we worked together for many years. And these people I send, if I do a symposium, to the open symposium, I always send these particular people who I believe that conveying a proper message. In that case, that she really insisted, the Kyoto Tsushin, Fukaya-san actually was insisted to put that small phrase to all the newspapers. So these, I think, human relationship is one thing to, we trust each other and then make a win-win relationship. Any other question? If you...
Hi. So, do you have any examples of situations that did not end positively? with communicating what you found to journalists? So if have you had any really
Bad experience?
Yeah, bad experience.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, in many cases, it's a small miscommunication. I didn't mean to, but or things like that. But in many cases, it can be solved in the end. For example, sometimes I did some press release, for example, and in some journal, that like even Science magazine, put the very wrong title of my news. It was like, because we are working on mice, they put the rat. So in this case, we just claim, please mend this part. And I don't know. I think it's a human-human relationship. Sometimes does not necessarily goes well in the beginning, but if we work together, patiently, I think we can make it. That's what I believe. No? So I have a small advertising. We are working, receiving a Monkasho Yosan, a funding grant from MEXT. We are still working on the child abuse cases. And this is a program for the parents who have problem with the relationship with the children. There are a lot of different kinds of programs. And now we are providing these programs with the support, financial support. Because generally these programs are expensive. Yeah, and then it's not much government, like a Jido Sodansho, will provide this. So it's basically a private thing, and then it costs much. So that we are supporting the people by just like monitoring the program, so that they receive a questionnaire, so that it's a lot of questionnaire, but if you answer the questionnaire, we pay for you, things like that. So if you're interested in this kind of activity, please come to get the brochure, and please visit my website.